With that out of the way, we can finally get into the more well-known Republic ground vehicles, beginning with the Grand Army's non-aquatic Repulsor craft. These vehicles, a mix of speeders and repulsor tanks, were generally, but not exclusively on the lighter side, used to support the Republic's heavier walkers. Most of these craft were also developed later in the war to fill niches that opened up as the conflict went on, or to supplement the Grand Army's original arsenal. Let's start with speeders. The Republic had a few models of speeder bike, primarily the 74Z speeder bike, the Bark speeder, the CK6 swoop bike, and the 105K Lancer bike. All of these, except the CK6, were produced by Aratech Repulsor Company, a long-time Republic contractor. The Arakid 74Z, which you might know as the Galactic Empire's preferred model of speeder, was a popular model of military speeder bike that was also available to private buyers, while the Bark and the 105K were exclusively produced for the Republic military and Coruscant police. The CK6 Swoop, produced by Bespin Motors, was also Republic military exclusive. The 74Z and the Bark Speeder were the most widely used of the GAR's speeder bikes. The 74Z was the lighter of the two models, with only moderate armor plating and a single blaster cannon capable of reaching speeds of up to 500 km per hour. The Bark Speeder was slightly faster and much more heavily armored and armed with 4 light blaster cannons. Both were one-man speeders, though the 74Z could mount a single passenger and the Bark Speeder could be fielded with an optional sidecar. The two bikes filled more or less the same niche, allowing individual clone troopers, often but not exclusively biker advanced recon commandos, to act in supplemental roles, primarily reconnaissance and fast-paced strafing attacks on enemy positions. An LAAT gunship could carry 4 of either bike, and acclimated class assault ships generally carried 320 each, ensuring that speeder bikes were readily available on most battlefields. Originally, the 74Z was the standard issue Republic speeder bike, while the Bark Speeder was reserved for the use of ARC troopers and other elite soldiers. However, Bark Speeders were soon made available to the whole Grand Army, and their superior speed, firepower, and armor meant that they quickly eclipsed the 74Z as the main speeder bike of the Grand Army. It never phased the 74Z out, however, as the lighter bike was cheaper and easier to mass produce. The 74Z was more commonly used for reconnaissance purposes, while the Bark Speeder's greater durability and stopping power meant that it was typically used for more aggressive purposes. The two classes of speeders saw use side by side until the end of the Clone Wars. The other classes of Republic speeder bike were more specialized. The 105K Lancer bike was a model of high-speed swoop bike loosely based on the 74Z, designed for the use of the Lancer Battalion. It was essentially a more armored and unarmed variant of the 74Z, able to seat a single clone Lancer. These bikes were rarely used due to their extremely niche role. The CK6, meanwhile, was meant to operate in freezing cold temperatures, hence its nickname, the Freako Speeder. These bikes were slightly larger and more heavily armored than the Bark Speeder. They could reach speeds of 550 km per hour and were armed with dual laser cannons. Their design was built around insulating the bike's more delicate systems, as well as its riders, from the cold. The pilot of the CK6 sat within a fully enclosed, temperature-controlled bubble cockpit, and they could operate smoothly in even the fiercest of blizzards, unlike Bark Speeders or LAAT gunships. However, the CK6 was expensive and designed for a very specific niche, so it wasn't all that common. When it did see use, it was mostly in the same capacity as the Bark Speeder or 74Z. Next up, we have the Republic's two-person speeder, the ISP or Infantry Support Platform. This underrated little craft was a joint project on the part of Aratech and Ulshos Manufacturing, and you might know it by its nickname, the Republic Swamp Speeder. The ISP was a land speeder designed for operation in waterlogged environments where other repulsor craft might have some trouble. It was based around a larger repulsor lift platform that spread out the craft's weight, and it was powered by a turbofan that could operate more reliably in swamps than ion engines. 2 clones, a pilot and a gunner, were required to man the ISP, which boasted a pair of rapid-firing twin blaster cannons, which were good against enemy personnel and light vehicles alike. The ISP was much slower than dedicated speeder bikes, and it filled a very different niche. As its name suggests, it was an infantry support platform meant to provide infantry units with supporting fire. It was a late war addition to the Republic roster, meant to complement the Republic's light walkers, which we'll discuss later. During the Clone Wars, the Republic fielded two larger land speeder type craft, the RTT and HAET-221. The RTT, or Republic Troop Transport, was essentially a land speeder version of the LAAT gunship. Produced by Rothana Heavy Engineering, the RTT was minimally armoured and could often be sluggish, though for such a small craft it was very well armed, boasting 2 laser cannons and 2 mass driver missile launchers, with the latter behind the same kind used on LAAT gunships. RTTs required a pilot and a gunner, and each could carry 12 clone troopers across battlefields. These were very simple craft with a very simple role, tasked with transporting squads of clone troopers to different parts of active battlefields when LAAT gunships were unavailable. They didn't see all that much use, since the LAAT was omnipresent on most battlefields, but they had their niche and filled it well. The HAET-221 gunboat, meanwhile, is the coolest Republic vehicle you've never heard of. This one actually appears in the background of Revenge of the Sith, and it's a crime that it was never seen more. Its name stands for High Altitude Entry Transport, and it was designed by the Mi-Kun Corporation as an alternative to the LAAT, but in practice it functioned as a ground-level speeder most of the time. The ship was sleek, fast, well-armoured and equipped with a wealth of sensors. It required a crew of 3, consisting of a pilot, co-pilot and gunner, and it could carry a number of clone troopers in its passenger hold. The HAET-221 was armed with 6 anti-personnel blasters and a single anti-vehicle laser cannon, giving it a respectable amount of power. The intended niche of the HAET-221 was somewhat unique. It was designed to be launched from low orbit, from which it would rapidly descend onto a planet, using its sophisticated sensors to map out the world's surface as it descended. Once it reached the ground, it would drop off its passengers, and then it would act as a light repulsor tank, as its thrusters weren't powerful enough to take it back into orbit. Introduced before the start of the Outer Rim sieges, the HAET-221 played an essential role in rapid insertion and infantry support, and it could also act in a secondary reconnaissance role using its powerful sensor suite. All told, it's a bit of an oddball ship, but one with a lot of utility. Moving on, we have the Republic's light repulsor tanks, the TX-130 and the RX-200, both produced by Rothana Heavy Engineering. The TX-130 Sabre-class fighter tank, also known as the Jedi Starfighter of the ground, was a beast of a vehicle. It was designed to balance speed and maneuverability, armor and firepower, and it did so extremely well. It could reach speeds of up to 320 km per hour, could turn on a dime, and it was both well armored and well armed. Its armor was moderately tough, but many TX-130s featured a pair of light shield generators which made the tank much tougher. The TX-130 was armed with 2 heavy laser cannons, a medium twin laser turret or turreted beam cannon, and a pair of onboard missile launchers. It was manned by a pilot, a co-pilot, and an optional turret gunner, with room for 2 passengers in the main cabin. Some TX-130s also had on board astromech droids. The TX-130 was extremely effective, a jack of all trades meant primarily for use as armoured cavalry or as a fast-moving, hard-hitting anti-armour vehicle. It was, however, hugely expensive, so use of the TX-130 was limited. When it did see action, it acted more or less as a ground-based starfighter, flitting across the battlefield and blowing up targets of opportunity. It was a strictly offensive weapon, meant to make the most of its speed and firepower, which meant that it rarely operated as part of larger, slower army units. The RX-200 Falcon-class assault tank, meanwhile, was much more conventional. These repulsor-lift artillery tanks were larger, heavier and slower, crewed by at least 1 pilot and 1 gunner. They were heavily armoured, protected by a pair of anti-personnel blasters, and they had their own powerful onboard reactors, which were used to power massive ion-based beam cannons. These cannons could rapidly short out deflector shields with sustained fire, and they could also disable starfighters with a single shot. For the most part, they were backline artillery vehicles meant to act as mobile anti-air emplacements or deflector shield disablers. The RX-200 was a niche vehicle, first deployed a few months into the war, but when it saw use, it could be devastatingly effective, ensuring Republic air superiority and nullifying otherwise game-changing deflector shields. Lastly, we have the largest repulsor craft in the Republic arsenal, the UTAT, or Unstable Terrain Armored Transport. Developed by Kuat Drive Yards in collaboration with the Meekun Corporation, this was a heavy tank meant to serve as alternatives to the ATTE or ATAT on battlefields with unstable terrain where heavy walkers could be a liability. When used, they made up the armored core of the Republic battle groups, advancing with larger columns of infantry against heavily fortified enemy positions. The UTAT floated on a set of repulsor lift skis that could be adjusted to account for the terrain. They were huge and densely armored, about as tough as an ATTE. They had spacious internal cabins that allowed the UTATs to serve as troop transports, like the larger walkers they were an alternative to, capable of carrying up to 20 clone troopers, though the exact internal layout of the UTAT is unknown. Operated by at least one pilot and 5 gunners, the UTAT was extraordinarily heavy armored, more so than both the ATTE and ATAT. Its primary weapon was a top-mounted artillery turbo laser turret, which was supplemented by a pair of side-mounted heavy laser cannons, all of which seem to have been styled on the primary mass driver of the ATTE. For defense, the UTAT boasted 6 anti-infantry laser cannons, 4 turrets mounted on the back, and a pair of fixed guns mounted under the cockpit. All told, the UTAT was one of the most powerful heavy vehicles in the Republic arsenal, a behemoth on par with the Republic's more well-known heavy vehicles.